Myself Padmaja, Associate Professor, Department of CSE, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering, Hyderabad. Let us discuss about the exception handling mechanism in Python using try, except, else block and also the finally block. So, what are the exception handling mechanism and how to handle it using the programming concept? Let us understand in Python. So, first of all, let us understand that the try and except blocks are used for exception handling and what is the syntax of it. So, coming to the syntax, so first you have to write down try the keyword, and except is another keyword. So, try followed by the setup statements which you want to write for executing your program logic. And if there is any exception, then how to handle that exception. So, for that there is a handler required. So, that handler you will write using the except block. So, except followed by an exception name, and we write down the setup statements which will be executed as a part of handling the exception. If there is any exception, then the except block code will be executed. Now, if there are multiple except blocks, then how a program gets executed? That means sometimes we need to handle more than one exception raised by try block. So, to handle the multiple exceptions, we can write multiple except blocks in our program. So, how to write multiple except blocks? First, let us see the syntax. Now, you can see here, try is the try block. Inside this, we are writing the program logic. So, number of statements we are writing for our program. Now, if this particular code raises multiple number of exceptions, so each one we can handle separately by writing the except block. So, you can see here except, then the first type of exception, if it is occurring, then what it has to do. Then if the second type of exception it will occur, then what it has to do. So, like that, you can write multiple except blocks in a program. Now, let us see one example. For example, suppose you want to find out, we are reading two numbers and we want to do division. That is A divided by B you want to do. So, let us read the numerator value and the denominator value. Now, try. In the try block, let us write our logic to find out the quotient. So, quotient is equal to numerator by denominator. So, when the denominator is 0, for example, numerator is 10, denominator is 0. When the denominator is 0, then it raises an exception. So, whenever an exception is generated, then you have written in your program multiple types of exception. So, whatever is then what type of exception it generates, that particular handler block will be executed. See here, so we have written that except, is it a name error? So, if it is a name error, then this print statement will be executed that you are using a variable which is not declared. For example, is it a value error? No. So, this statement will not be executed. Now, this is a zero division error? Yes. This is a zero division error. So, the denominator cannot be 0. This statement only will be executed. So, here you can write multiple except statements, and whichever is true, only that particular handler will be executed. So, this is called the multiple except blocks in a single program. Now, can you write multiple exceptions in a single block? Yes, it is possible. Now, in Python, we can handle multiple exceptions using a single block. Let us see the syntax first. So first try block, try if the number of statements we are executing, then if it raises an exception, so inside the except, we will write down first except followed by the first exception name, second exception name, and so on. We can write n number of exception names. And if any of them is true, then it will execute the number of statements. So, we can write multiple exceptions in a single block itself. So, let us see one example. In the same example, we will talk about where we are reading the numerator and denominator. Suppose the numerator is 10, denominator is 0. And in the try block, we are finding out the quotient. So, quotient is nothing but numerator by denominator. So, this becomes 10 by 0. Okay. So, as this raises an exception then what will happen? So it goes to the except block. So in the except block, what is there? There are different types of exceptions are written over here. Name error, value error and zero division error. Out of this, the last one is the correct exception. So it will print that statement that denominator cannot be 0. So this way, multiple exceptions can be written in a single block also. Now, can you handle any exception? Yes. If you want to execute the same code or handler for any type of exception, then common handler also you can create by using the following syntax. So, instead of writing a particular type of exception, a common handler can also be written. That means, if any type of exception it raises, it goes to the handler block and it will execute that particular code. That is called writing in common handler. So, see the syntax, try, then the number of statements. If those program logic will raise an exception, then it goes to the except block. Can you see over here that there is no exception name? There is no exception name is not written over here. That means it is called a common exception handler. So, whatever may be the type of exception it generates, it will execute the handler block, that is the statements which is written in the your except block. So, let us see the same example. Suppose here you are reading the numerator as 10, denominator as 0 and the quotient is 10 by 0 raises an exception. So, in this case, you can see here it goes to the except block and it prints the denominator cannot be 0. That without looking for what type of exception it is just commonly executing the code which is written in the except block. Now, with the exception handling programs, we can also write an else clause. So, the try and except blocks can be followed by an optional else clause or else block. So, this is not mandatory, but if you want to write down an else block, you can also write. So, the code in the else block will execute when there is no exception in that try block. So, if there is no suitable exception for any exception to be handled, then automatically the control goes to the optional or the final else block. Let us. So, this way the final else clause is executed. Now, how to raise an exception and how to write down how to use the raise keyword in Python. So, raising exceptions. So, we can raise exceptions manually also, even though there are no exceptions using the raise keyword. So, if you want to raise any exception manually, that you can do it through the raise keyword. So, let us see what is the syntax of the raise keyword. So, raise followed by the exception name, then arguments and the trackback. So, what is this? How to raise the exception? So, here you can see that exception name is the type of exception that you want to raise. You want to generate or create what type of exception that you have to write as an exception name. Then arguments are nothing but the exception arguments and trackback is the trackback object used for this exception. So let us see over here. Here the argument and trackback are optional. If you want, you can use it. Otherwise, only raise followed by exception name also you can write. See the example. First, let us see the syntax. Try followed by raise name error. So, using the raise keyword, we have raised one exception that is called raise the name error here. Okay. Then, we are handling that name error in the except block. So, that it is a name error we are seeing. So, you can raise an exception using the raise keyword in Python. Handling exceptions in functions. So, we can use try and except blocks inside functions also. So, in the try block, we can call a function and if that function raises an exception, then it can be handled in the except block. So, let us see one example how to use the try and except block in functions. So, see over here, we have a function called division, definition division, which takes two arguments. One is a number or numerator and one is the denominator. It takes two arguments and it returns you the numerator by denominator. So, while while doing the numerator by denominator, if there is an exception, if it raises an exception, then we have to go for the try block. So you can see here inside the try block, the definition of the function is written over here. And if you want to use the try and except blocks, then in the try block, you need to first call the function. So here, the function is called in the try block. The function is called here. Now, whenever the function is called with two arguments 30 and 0, so this function gets executed for numerator 30 and for denominator 0, and it returns your 30 by 0 will raise an exception over here. So, in the try block, you need to call the function, and if it raises an exception, then it has to be handled in the except block. So, it is handling because the 0 division error is there. So, the denominator cannot be 0. That statement gets executed. So, in this way, the try and except block can be written in the functions also. Now, there is, like your else block, there is also a finally block that is available which can be written in Python. So, a try block must be followed by one or more except blocks or one finally block. So, a finally block normally contains a code that executes irrespective of whether an exception occurs or not. So, finally, that finally block will execute whether there is an exception or not. So, let us see the syntax. So, try some statements, and if you want to write some exceptions, then you can write the different except blocks, and this finally block will be executed at the end. Now, let us see what are the built-in exceptions that is available in Python. Every programming language will have certain built-in or predefined exceptions. So, this list gives you the details about the built-in exceptions in Python. So, arithmetic error exception is there, overflow error is there, then floating point error. We talked about multiple examples regarding the 0 division error so far. Then assertion error is there, attribute error is there. These are the built-in exceptions in Python, and we can handle it. Similarly, some more is there, like your import error. While importing a module, if there is any mistake, then it raises an exception if the import statement fails. Similarly, the lookup error is there, the index error is there. Whenever you are retrieving an element from any sequence and the index number is incorrect, then that index error will be generated. Then key error is there. If the key is not found in a dictionary, if you are trying to retrieve a key value pair with an incorrect key, then key error it will raise. Similarly, name error is there. Whenever you are trying to use a wrong identifier name, then name error will come. Similarly, syntax error may be there, value error may be there, runtime errors are there. So, these are the different types of built-in exceptions in Python. Thank you so much. In this video, we have learned about the try block, the except block, finally, and the else block, and how to do program in exception handling. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.